Good evening. As Dean of American Studies at Opine University, it falls to me to do a talk about the Great Santa, or as the Iranians call you, the Great Satan. And where else do you begin when you talk about a country but at a point of entry? And usually that point of entry, the biggest, is usually a sort of cloaca leading to an alimentary canal of rivers. And the cloaca in the case of the United States would have to be New Orleans. Now you may say that I have a prejudice about New Orleans, and you would not be wrong. You see, I was boynapped and taken there by a vicar and a nun for the delectation of a black American millionaire. And I can tell you that if you did not have enough sleepless nights owing to the attentions of the vicar, the nun, and the millionaire, you had other distractions which I will tell you about in a moment. You will all be aware that there is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun. It's been ruin of many a poor lad, and of me, the vicar, one. Now, that was wrong. I made a mistake there. But it does sum up my sleepless nights, either being rogered or kept awake by countless funerals passing by the apartment in which we did our rogering. And the thing about funerals in New Orleans is there's no shortage of corpses. There are many, many corpses. And it may just be that because they are accompanied by jazz bands playing Duke Wellington or whatever it is they play, they have to finish the song before they can bury the corpse. And so they go round and round your hotel until their song is finished and they're quite blown out. Never mind the fact that I was being blown out at the same time. Now, New Orleans has many, many exciting things about it as well. People in Canada who were thrown out by the British came streaming down to the south of America, and they were the Cajuns, and they brought their food with them. So food in New Orleans is pretty damn good. Now, there's also a dish called gumbo, which is not exactly Cajun, but it is comprised of any meats in a sort of Louisiana hot pot. And whenever an animal dies at the zoo, particularly a jumbo, you can get on every street corner jumbo gumbo. Delicious, beautifully flavoured, seasoned. It put me off, however, when my companion found an elephant's toenail in his bowl of soup. Now, that's New Orleans for you. We then have to go up the Mississippi. Now, the Mississippi is a very long very long river, which I have called an alimentary canal, just as the Mersey is the alimentary canal for the city of Liverpool in the United Kingdom. But the Mississippi passes through scores of little Tom Sawyers and Huckleberry Finns, naked in their birthday suits, frolicking in the water, completely oblivious to the alligators that swim around them. And I believe that is because they had a spell woven to protect them by somebody called Injun Joe. And they fell out with Injun Joe when they didn't pay him. And now Injun Joe is hunting for their blood just as avidly as the alligators. So you take your paddle steamer and you paddle up the river. And every paddle steamer has a Clark Gable look-alike on it. Very greasy, brill-creamed hair, and a habit of winning at cards by duplicitous means. then you risk, if you object, you risk a discharge from his enormous gun. And the ladies quite like that kind of thing. Very long-barreled, very, very macho. So you then proceed up, and after a while you tire of the 2,350-mile-long Mississippi River. And so you branch out, and I went instead to somewhere called Las Vegas. Now, Las Vegas was founded by the Morons. The Morons came mostly from Europe, landing on the east coast of America, and then they traipsed across in rickety wagons to the west coast. Had they the wit to land on the west coast, they would not have made such an arduous journey. And had they the wit to see through the Moron church, they wouldn't have gone in the first place. But go they did. And when they arrived, their leader, Big Man Young, bashed his stave upon the ground of the Salt Lake and said, "This is the place." I think he was referring to a fossilized fish, but everybody bowed down to his wisdom and started building huts on the Salt Lake. And one day, that transformed into the Salt Lake City, a place revered for its temples and for causing young men to commit suicide through guilt about their homosexuality. Now, Brigham Young was actually, I said Brigham, didn't I? Brigham, his name was. Brigham Young was actually a disciple of their prophet, Joseph Smith. Now, Joseph had 33 wives, some of whom were as young as 14, and some of whom were married to other people. But of course, as a man of God, he was able to do these things, and people respected him for it. They said he was protecting the girls in the absence of their husbands whom he had sent on missions. And so Salt Lake became bigger and bigger, and eventually they needed money. So what did they do? They built casinos in the desert. That's what they did. Of course, they kept at arm's length from this venture, letting gangsters like Mo Green build it, and they just took a cut from the money that they lent. And they're very rich. You know, to this day, the Moron Church, is worth $80 billion, and they keep it tightly under wraps. Yes, they do. Their aim is to become as rich as the Catholic Church and just about as corrupt. Now, I say corrupt because I know of so-called missionaries who indulged in the very practices that the church outlaws. I know this because when they called at my door, within 5 minutes, we were having conjugal activities, which persuaded me to join temporarily, since they were very nubile and very willing. Now, from Las Vegas, we go north, up back to the Mississippi, and back up to the Rockies. Now, the Rockies are aptly called because they are jagged, vicious places inhabited only by bears and men in bearskin hats who live in cabins and abduct children. This is the nature of America. Everyone there lives on hamburgers and wieners. They call them wieners, which is not as confusing as it may seem, for another reason which I will come on to in another chapter. And these burgers and wieners are full of fat and salt. And so Americans are full of fat and salt. And they have rednecks on account of the sun. Now, these rednecks are very well known as supporters of one side of politics, the one that gives them the right to bear howitzers and machine guns and F-15s if they so wish. Now that is very, very, very peculiar to the United States. You cannot own an F-15 in the USSR. Oh, I beg your pardon, it's now Russia, isn't it? It's no longer the USSR. Or in China. The only people allowed to own those weapons are the armies. So in America, sometimes the criminals are better armed than the police. And the police are actually apt to turn on people who are less well armed. So the police will round up poor blacks, poor whites, anybody who lives in a skip, and they won't see the advantages of skip living. For example, during the great floods in New Orleans, all the rich people died, drowned, but the people who lived in skips floated upriver to a happy landfall. Now, the people who live in skips are also high on various drugs. These are not prescribed. These are obtained on street corners from snotty children who are run by pimps. And the advantage of this is that if you arrest a child and they're underage, you cannot prosecute them. And so the pimps get their drugs out free. This is just from chapter 1 of my book, The Great Santa. In chapter 2, I shall explore further the very strange behavior of sects. And I mean sects, S-E-C-T-S, not S-E-X, in the United States. But that is the end of this first installment. God bless you. One has to say that about Americans. God bless you. And have a good day, y'all. Yes, yeah, y'all, I think is what you say. I'm going to go off and have a good day myself, probably masturbating over memories of New Orleans. Thank you for listening to me. Good night.